Welcome, everyone. I am John Ryan, and I am pleased to have my co-host Rudy Reyes with me this week for the NFL Wildcard Previews, Picks, and Prediction Show. I promise you, you're going to learn a lot. Maybe not all our picks will win, but you're going to learn a lot about sports handicapping and how we look at games just from a straight-up viewpoint with this NFL Wildcard weekend. And what a wild week it has already been, Rudy, with all the news. Belichick just minutes ago, literally parting ways. It's 24 years of his life, and what a career it was. But I couldn't help also to think about Nick Saban and how Belichick and Nick Saban were coaches. Belichick was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, I believe, from 1990 to 94, I think it was, Rudy. And guess who his defensive coordinator was? Nick Saban. I'm not saying that the Browns made a mistake. It's all hindsight, of course. Nobody knew at that time that these two coaches were going to become legends, but they sure did. And then you have Pete Carroll. It just seems like, I guess when you get to be 72, you have to move on to, drinking, making drinks with umbrellas in them and playing bingo, I guess. I don't know what it really means. I think it's coincidental. But Rudy, welcome to the show. And what's your take on this wild week so far?
Man, it's just getting wilder. You had Pete Carroll retiring as well out of Seattle. Retired at least from the head coaching position for the Seahawks, and now going to be a special assistant. Of course, you know what that means. The new era begins in Seattle, I guess, is what that really, really, truly means, as well as it does in New England. Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft are agreeing to part ways as well. This is something that I can't say was unprecedented. People were leaning on whether or not that's going to actually happen, or if it was just a rumor and the rumor mill started churning. Where does he go? Where does he coach again? Does he stay on the sidelines for another season? There's just so many variables when it comes to that. And then, of course, the aforementioned Nick Saban, who won 5 national titles with the Alabama Roll Tide football program, as well as one with LSU. So certainly a lot of head coaching vacancies, and that's just touching the iceberg in regards to coaching vacancies between the interim Antonio Pierce in the Las Vegas Raiders system, David Tepper firing Frank Reich out of Carolina, Arthur Smith's gone from Atlanta, Mike Vrabel's gone from Tennessee. I mean, there's so many variables, and I'm not saying that Mike Vrabel is an old and feeble guy, certainly not so, but they wanted to move on in a different direction. I think all these teams are going to be very much so vying for the next next best thing, and right now we don't know what that is yet.
You sure don't.
The door is open, but of course, a head coaching job is a premium in the NFL, and it's not something that should be taken lightly, at least from that standpoint.
Yep, I agree. And on that note, let's get right to these games, because these games are going to be barn burners, and I don't think any of them are going to be too boring. Except there is one potential blowout with the Buffalo Bills that we'll get to shortly. But in this matchup here, the first one of the week is a big one, and I think it is a team that has the ability to make it a run to the Super Bowl, and that is the Cleveland Browns. I've been saying that for about 2 months. I have actually a prop bet on them from several shows that I appeared on, mentioning that. It's still a pretty good price to take Cleveland, because the Baltimore Ravens are taking all the money right now, and rightfully so. I mean, they are right now the best team probably in all of football, and then, of course, you have the 49ers. But the Cleveland Browns find themselves 11-6 on the season, a wild card team going to the division winner Houston Texans, 10-7, a team with a rookie quarterback making his playoff debut. And historically, Rudy, that doesn't usually go too well. This guy may be special, though. So you can't rule out Houston winning this game or losing the game, because they have unseasoned quarterback under center here for this game. But you can't take anything away from Joe Flacco. His playoff results for his career, and he hasn't been in the playoffs in a long time, but they speak for themselves. He's been more than solid. Cleveland's a 2.5-point favorite right now with a total of 44.5 as I'm looking at it. And, dogs that in the wild card round, And in the playoffs, generally, a home dog that had lost to the current opponent during the regular season, such as the Texans did with the Browns. The Browns beat them earlier this year.
Mhm.
They bounced back 7-4 with 2 pushes in the playoffs. That's 64% telling us to take the Texans. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to waste any money on the. I'd rather lose with the Browns. Let's put it that way. And I'm just wondering if you agree with that.
I'm going to have to disagree with you because as we had and we had this conversation with Barry Long II that it was going to depend whether or not they were going to win the game on C.J. Stroud's shoulders, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He did enough. He did it frequently, and quite often was he able to go, move outside and navigate around the pocket in order to throw downfield to make things happen. It was on the arm of his that they actually won. I'm not going to suggest that the other side of the ball did nothing. They did, but certainly you have to score points, and the way you do it is with a guy named C.J. Stroud. Yes, he's a rookie. Yes, this is his first playoff game. But when all the hype was on between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, everybody was picking Bryce Young, the 1 overall pick, is going to be this, astronomically good player, and he is, but just not in a good system, whereas all the Texans needed removed, obviously far away from Deshaun Watson. Now here enters C.J. Stroud, which I think is certainly, and should rightfully so, be the offensive rookie of the year, at least right now. And for the regular season, if you wanted to stop that marker right there at that point, I think the Houston Texans are a huge surprise. I don't believe anybody believed that they would be in this position. However, the Cleveland Browns, did not come into this full-heartedly when their starting quarterback went down, the aforementioned Deshaun Watson, who hadn't really played all that great anyway. And now here you are with Joe Flacco, the farthest removed guy who's played for almost all 4 NFL teams within the AFC North. Actually, excuse me, 2. And when I look at this game, I think to myself, man, this is going to rely on whether or not Joe Flacco is going to turn the ball over in an untimely manner, which he had done during the regular season playing with the Browns for the games that he did play. I think one game he had 2 interceptions, but the defense kept them in this game. And that's one of the things that will keep the Cleveland Browns in this game. Whether or not they win the game is another story. But don't forget, Singletary didn't do a whole lot in Week 16 and only picked up 44 yards in 9 carries. So that had more to do about the Texans falling behind without Stroud being under center in that game. It's a little bit different when you have a guy who's already proven that he can do it in the regular season. Now it's just about proving it in the postseason. Singletary picked up almost 5 yards per carry with a nice little 17-yard skimper in the first quarter during Week 15 against Cleveland, but it doesn't open up any kind of opening spot as to if the Cleveland Browns are good or if they're bad, or if there's any type of glare defensively or in lack thereof, not being able to stop the pass as well as stopping the run. Now, don't forget, they haven't been great at stopping the run, John. They've given up 65 or more yards in 4 games in that stretch, including getting gashed for an 80-yard plus rush in 3 of those games. So this is more about the difference between pass and push with the ball, running it on the ground, versus C.J. Stroud having to throw it for 35 points per game. So this is going to have to be a well-thought-out, well-methodically executed game by Houston in order to really make the Cleveland defense honest, not only up front, but in the secondary.
Yeah, great stuff. I really like that breakdown there. And, I'm leaning towards the total also being a higher than expected scoring game. Sometimes these games, if one team gets out to a double-digit lead, can get a little bit out of hand because the other team realizes that they may not be able to come back and there's a letdown. So I do like this, and I think live in-game betting, if you see this total at 39.5 or lower, that is a golden opportunity. Again, no guarantee that it's going to win, but from my 29 years of experience, that is how I would choose to play this. And it's backed by a pretty cool system that's hit 81% winners, Rudy. I mean, that gets your attention, right? And it's covered the spread by 8.9 points per bet. And the requirements are simple. The total has to be between 42.5 and 50. So I'm taking a slice of 7.5 points. And one of the teams, being the Texans in this case, is averaging between 6.75 and 7.5 yards per pass attempt. They're coming off a game where they gained more than that, their average, which means that they're playing at a high level. The requirement there is 8 yards per pass attempt. We're in the second half of the regular season, including the playoffs, and they're facing a foe that is average on defense, generally speaking, based on this stat, allowing 5.25 to 5.9 yards per pass attempt. So it is a little bit better than average, but it's not at that unbelievable standard that Cleveland can do. But I really like how this system comes together. There's a statistical thing called the p-value. A lot of my friends on the previous shows have said I should call it the John Ryan value, because the p-value sounds not quite right. It's kind of has a weird sound to it. But anyway, it measures the randomness of variables working together. So this p-value is extraordinarily strong, meaning that the parameters I just read off work very, very well together, and it's not random that it's 81% winners here since 1996. So pretty outstanding situation, in my opinion. And I think as a team here, Rudy, I think we're looking for the Texans to make it very difficult for Cleveland, if not win the game, and for this total to go over the 44.5.
I agree with you there. I think it should be called the JR value, because you get a lot of value when you talk to JR. So I'm just throwing that out there. When it comes to no problem. There's a lot of things to look at, not only in this specific game. When we talk about the Dolphins and the Bills back in Week 18, we know there's a lot of things to be considered, and all bets are off the table. It was whether or not the Miami Dolphins can win and have better weather, or they're going to lose and face off against Kansas City on the road at Arrowhead in a very chilly situation. And of course, well, they got the opposite, and that's going to Kansas City, which is going to be extremely frigid. Weather plays a huge factor in this game explicitly between the Dolphins and the Chiefs. Kickoff Saturday night. It's going to be about 5 degrees. This is not for the faint-hearted, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to go out there, make sure you get a couple hot toddies in you, or dress accordingly, a couple beanies maybe. It's just going to be that cold. Grab some gloves. Don't worry about the beer you're holding. The gloves may or may not feel it, but this is going to affect the game in a very, very big way. Now, Kansas City, on the other hand, has really found a way to navigate through those cold weathers, and they've done it time and time again. They are no slouchers when it comes to cold weather. Matter of fact, they play better in cold weather as well. Oddly enough, the Dolphins do not play great in cold weather. They have done absolutely horrible collectively in every way, shape, or form, as it's going to be 10 degrees. And this is probably the closest and coldest game, and dates back to 83 when the Chiefs played a franchise game, and the coldest in franchise game in history at 0.5 degrees at kickoff. This is not going to be fun. This is going to be very cold. Packers, negative 13 degrees in the infamous Ice Bowl, 21-17 win over Dallas. Bengals, Chargers, 9-degree negative. Seahawks over Vikings, negative 6 degrees. Giants, Packers, negative 1 degree. You get my point. And my point is that it's going to be tough for the Dolphins to win on the road in this weather, whether or not they're going to run the ball or not. But by the time kickoff comes, John, it's going to be down to -1, which could very well be the coldest game of all time.
That's just brutal. That's like the Ice Bowl back in Green Bay and Dallas, I think it was, right? That one was pretty darn cold, too. I was actually at the coldest Penn State game ever. It was against Notre Dame, and I believe the year was 1989 or 90. And it was the only time I've ever been in a car where you go up over the mountains, the Seven Mountain Ridge, and it went negative on the top of the hill. It's in the, you're going through the Appalachians, so you're up there pretty high, but not like the Rockies. But, and the wind chill was just brutal. The one end of the stadium had not yet been closed, and it was blowing in right on the student body. And even though it was the biggest game of the year, most of the students left at halftime. and it was pretty cold. But it was worth it. Penn State upset them. Blair Thomas ran for like 228 yards. And it was amazing during the timeouts because it was a nationally televised game. I'll never forget the offensive lineman for Notre Dame. They didn't have any long sleeve shirts on. They just wore the football uniform. Arms are exposed. And wind chill was like minus 25 to minus 30. And they acted like it was no big deal. And I'll never forget that day. That was something.
That is way too cold for me. You will not catch me out there.
Guys that gets hammered and then takes your shirt off and thinks you're cool. Because you actually could die doing that. And
it's called stupidity, or pneumonia. That's what it is. A little historical fact here that in the past 10 home games of the Kansas City Chiefs, temperature was under 40 degrees. The Chiefs have gone 9-1, including 4-0 in the playoffs. I'm taking the Chiefs to win this game because the Dolphins just don't play well. I mean, look, it's a fish out of water. They're on icy land. They're just going to slip and slide. This is not going to be a pretty game. It's not going to be the most palatable game to watch. Now, don't forget, Coach Andy Reid hopes that this is, an anomaly. These missed catches. It's going to be even worse. That football is going to be like you're going to be throwing icicles at people. Try to hold on to a glass rock that's squared. Good luck with that.
That's going to be a challenge. It is.
Yeah, we're going to see about that and more. Moreover, I think this is not going to be the highest scoring game on the planet. Maybe in the I don't know. I'd say 10-7 type of range. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but those balls do not travel well. Field position is going to be an issue. That ball's going to drop like lead.
What do you think of this stat? I'm not throwing cold water on your pick either, but I just did a query. Game time temperature less than 20 degrees and playoffs. The road team is 9-8, and against the spread, they're 11-6-1 for 65%. That would put you on the Dolphins. How that? I mean, you talk about contrarian bet.
Yeah, I mean, if you want pizza money to put on that couple anchovies, some mushrooms, handle it. Get it done. Bake it in, flip it around, whatever you got to do. It can't be a big piece. It's got to be a one slicer. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, or in this case, all your pepperoni on one slice.
I always agree with that. Yep. You got to save some pepperoni and put it on that last slice. You got to take pepperoni from the first couple pieces and save it. That's what I like doing. Anyway, let's move to the Sunday games. And we have the first one here is the one that I think potentially could be a blowout win for Buffalo. I think they are the most dangerous team for anybody's aspirations to make it to the Super Bowl and win the AFC Championship. They just seem to be on a mission now, and they're playing. They're finding ways to win games when they don't play well, and I kind of like them a lot. This total opened at 39, is now down to 35. And we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers going to Buffalo, which is going to be another horrid weather condition environment, but not so bad for Pittsburgh because they're not too far away from Buffalo, and the weather in Western Pennsylvania and the Great Lakes area can get really brutal with high winds. And I think winds is probably going to be the biggest problem in this game. Mm-hmm. I usually don't think weather is going to matter. It's already baked into the number. But at 35, it feels like an under game between these two guys. But I like Buffalo here. Maybe you don't bet them pre-flop, Rudy, but you wait for maybe Pittsburgh scores the first touchdown of the game. And if they do, then there's your chance to get Buffalo at probably 7.5 instead of 10. So that's how I see it for now.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I don't know that I'm going to take Buffalo. This again could be a very low scoring game. And I'm not going to suggest that Josh Allen's not able to play in cold weather. I mean, heck, he plays in Orchard Park, New York. I mean, one of the coldest places. They had blizzards last year, the year before that. It's just that kind of football weather that Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Bills fans really enjoy and endure. And they just seem to play better in that type of environment. Yeah, they can play better like anybody else can in warmer, more tropical conditions, say if you were in Miami or whatnot. But the Bills look really good. Josh Allen has been extremely well. well versed in regards to games just like this. He's been in playoff games before. This is not his first rodeo. But there's an old adage, or maybe a cliche, I guess, about the team that nobody wants to play. I don't know if the Bills. I don't know if the Bills are that team yet. I mean, they haven't really shown the propensity to being that kind of team where nobody wants to play them. And of course, everybody deserves to be in this position, regardless of what team is in the playoffs, because nobody wants to play a team who is traveling on the road. The Steelers did it as a 7th seed back in 04-05, and they had to go and they had to travel to Denver. Then they had to go to Indy. You know, it wasn't something that was an anomaly, but to go on to win the Super Bowl and being the lowest seed possible, it's really kind of an unheard of, path. And the Steelers are certainly on that path, at least from what we're looking at now that Mason Rudolph is a QB1 under center for Pittsburgh. They've managed to do a lot of things, I think more so to prove to everyone. Of course, not really the most talked about team are the Pittsburgh Steelers in regards to the ground game between Jalen Warren, between Najee Harris, what they've been able to do and kind of force their will on opponents. And of course, the angry runs along the way with guys like Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, who's one of the toughest guys to bring down. But we've seen this, play out time and time again, where you make the least amount of mistakes, you don't cause, you don't fumble the ball, and able to take care of that ball. Of course, it was a very sloppy game last week, but moreover, this is about the team that everybody wants to play, the one they believe they can rub out. And I think the Bills have that mindset in regards to who the Steelers are, and they can actually just drop off the Steelers on the side of the road like an unwanted piece of pizza. Maybe just crust only. I don't know, whatever works for you. But Peyton Manning was quoted as stating that he's not sure anybody wants to play the Bills right now because they're not sure what they're going to get. Is it the consistent, on-point, accurate Josh Allen or fumbleitis Josh Allen version? Again, there's a lot to be said here. The Bills are a 2nd seed in the AFC for a very good reason. They'll take on the Steelers at home. It's going to be another inclement weather day, John, as you well stated. Of course there is a great edge being, and there is a home team kind of environment that the Bills are going to kind of soak in to the sun, and the Steelers are going to be on the outside looking in. But this isn't, look, every team that goes into hostile territory, hostile environment is going to have to play with the chip on the shoulder. And this is not going to be for the faint-hearted on either side of the ball. This is going to be a high wind, frigid wind chill likely, and obviously snow is possible, obviously, because it is in Orchard Park, New York, which is by far the most furthest point of New York where it gets colder and colder and colder. And so this is going to be a very low-scoring game. The Bills will not have Rasul Douglas. Gabe Davis also held out of practice. They're going to have to find the location of the snow band. They could be dressed in white, and if so, the snow could very well hide them. So, this is going to be a very interesting game. It's expected to be 24 degrees at 1 o'clock Eastern time, and winds could be at least 50 miles per hour. So, this is going to be a game that I don't think anybody really wants to watch because of how messy it could be. But I think it's going to be a good one. Steelers will end up getting by 3.
Yeah, and this could, I was thinking while you were talking, Pittsburgh does have the ability to run the ball. And Buffalo has struggled at time to stop the run. Pittsburgh is 6-0 in road games off a division game the last 2 seasons. Buffalo 0-6 in home games after having won 4 or 5 of the last 6 games over the last 2 seasons. And Buffalo is 12-25 with 1 push ATS after 4 or more consecutive wins, going all the way back to 1992. So if you like Pittsburgh, those trends support a play on there. Buffalo is 32-17 ATS in home games after gaining 400 or more total yards in their previous game, going all the way back to 1992. So there's some support for you guys out there who like Buffalo. And I think I'm going to stick with my guns and cheer for the Steelers to score first, and hopefully it's a touchdown. And then I'm going to jump on Buffalo at a touchdown early in the first quarter would probably make Buffalo priced at about maybe 6.5, but probably more like 7 or 7.5. But that's still better than paying 10. So that's what I'm going to look forward to on that one. Let's see. The next one up here is another good one. And we have the Green Bay Packers going against the Dallas Cowboys. And I had mentioned to you before we went on the air here, Rudy, that I kind of like the chances of Green Bay coming into Dallas and sneaking away with a win and causing all kinds of problems with decisions of what they're going to do in Dallas and the drama that would come out of that. I was surprised that it was only a 7.5 point line. The total is 50.5. Obviously, the weather conditions are not going to be that severe in Dallas this weekend to prevent scoring. And I think the higher this game goes in terms of the total, gives Green Bay a greater chance to actually pull off the upset. I know Dallas is averaging like 37 a game at home, and they're averaging 20 on the road. They're a Jekyll and Hyde team with the widest differential in scoring based on venue in the last like 30 years. And that inconsistency may come to haunt them when they have to go play probably the 49ers at some point to get to the Super Bowl. That's going to be a very tough task for anybody. But how do you see this game breaking down, and who's going to win it?
We all know that wild card weekend is the most wildest of wild, and we've seen upsets like this happen on a regular basis. Look, Dak Prescott couldn't have ended the season any better the way he did last week. I mean, he played a huge part in the fourth quarter, and during that time, he threw 4 touchdowns and filled with nothing but high completion throws and threw for 279 yards. And he's just been playing the way that you have expected him. Jerry Jones had high expectations. I was there at Cowboys training camp in Ventura, and there were just so many things to like about Dak Prescott's ability to get that ball downfield and to commit to not only the team, but in playing better and doing better and recognizing defenses. And, look, his 123 QBR passer rating is by far the fourth highest this year. And, of course, that passer rating came on Thanksgiving against Washington. So the way that it pans out and what it looks like in between what the Green Bay Packers have done, they finished, top 10 in the fewest passing yards allowed in the secondary. But they've also allowed 21 passing touchdowns as well, which is the same exact number as the Dallas Cowboys. The difference is that when it comes to second last in total interceptions, 10th worst in sacks, they're allowing 7th worst passer rating in the league. So what that means is that the Packers are able to not move the ball downfield, whereas in the secondary, whereas the Dallas Cowboys are able to really pick that apart with DaRon Bland, who had 6 interceptions leading out of the regular season. And it's just going to get any worse. No, Jordan Love hasn't had a bad season in his first year as a starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and he finished with the same exact amount of touchdowns in second, along with Dak Prescott, and threw 11 interceptions. But the problem is that the Dallas Cowboys play so much better at home. They have played better at home all season long. They played the best against some of the best in the NFL at home. On the road, that's always been kind of a topsy-turvy. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what we're going to get. We've seen them playing against the Bills, and they got demolished by the Buffalo Bills. So it's not going to – I'm not going to sit here and go on a limb and say they're going to play perfect at home, but what I am going to say is that Dak Prescott and company is going to get it done on the offensive side of the ball and advantage the Dallas defense with DaRon Bland. And I don't know if you're going to see Stephon Gilmore, who was held out of practice due to an injury. We're going to see what that looks like. He's been a pretty integral part coming into his first year as a safety / corner for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that the numbers when it comes to the amount of points scored, the interceptions from the Dallas secondary, the pressures up front with Micah Parsons and Lawrence on the opposite side. I just think there's way too much Dallas in this. Dallas will get the win.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit closer than people think. I can't disagree that Dallas is going to win. Whether they cover the 7.5, and I do like that hook. Is another question. Dallas is 2-12 against the spread, Rudy, when they're facing a solid offensive team like Green Bay that is averaging more than 5.65 yards per play in games played in the second half of the regular season and playoffs over the last 3 years. That's a pretty that's not a good situation for Dallas there facing Green Bay, but it's hard to fade Dallas at home. They play totally different football at home than they do on the road, and it's much more advantageous to fade them when they're on the road. So I'm going to stand aside on that one and give it some more thought before I make a formal bet on the Packers. I might be thinking again, live in-game, Dallas scores first, which they probably should expect to do. You can get Dallas then easily at double digits, and that might be the plan of action that I'll take. Let's see now. We go on to the next game here, and this is the Rams. Boy, this is a matchup of quarterbacks, huh? This is a good one. Rams are 3-point road underdogs. They go to Detroit, Michigan to take on the Lions. Totals 51.5. Detroit has really become the darling of the NFC. I would say that it's been since 1993 they even won a division title, and that was with Barry Sanders. So you got to tip your hat to Detroit, and you almost kind of have to root for them. I don't know if I'd call them Cinderella. They have that little bit of a feel of Cinderella here, that they might be the team that can upset either Dallas or San Fran to get to the Super Bowl, which would be pretty cool. But how do you see this game breaking down, and who's going to win it?
Well, what's interesting is now you have the opposing quarterbacks who were traded now playing against one another. So that's one storyline that's going to be discussed during the game. The Lions open this up at a -3, so they are the favorites, and they are playing at home. They haven't hosted a football game there since the great Barry Sanders. And oddly enough, when I look at this team who's now coming back from almost resurrection type of death, in over 30 years, they're actually hosting a game. The last Super Bowl that was played there is when the Pittsburgh Steelers had taken on the Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl 40. And I remember watching that game and thinking to myself, man, I wonder what Lions fans are thinking, that someone else is going to come in and watch a playoff game in their house and actually watch a Super Bowl game being played in their house. Either or was probably on their mindset. The difference is now the Detroit Lions are hosting a playoff game there for the very first time. And I love the fact alone that you have these wonderful and fabulous guys who have been playing under Dan Campbell for such a long time. It almost feels like a long time. I don't mean like 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. He's in his second season, Dan Campbell given all the tools and weaponry to really make things happen and turn it around with Jared Goff under center for the Detroit Lions. And look, these guys have played against one another a few times. Matthew Stafford, as the Lions quarterback, obviously, he had done enough to help make other teams look at them and take them very seriously, whereas now he had done that in Los Angeles and actually took them so seriously they had made a Super Bowl run in 2021. I was there at that Super Bowl, and that was by far something that you can't take away from them. At that point, he had a 14th in DVOA, averaging just 4.3 yards per attempt between Akers and Darrell Henderson, with a respective workload rather. But then you fast forward to 23, the Rams ranked 7th in rushing offense according to DVOA, and then now you look at Kyren Williams and his 5.0 yards per attempt, almost 229 carries. How big does he have to be? Huge in this game. Absolutely monstrous in this game. Cam Akers expected to carry the load after having 3 games of 100-plus yards to end 2022. And now here Kyren Williams comes in, almost an afterthought kind of guy, until Akers proved that he was basically fool's gold and traded to the Vikings ahead of week 3. So again, Kyren Williams has the monkey on his back. And this offense is going to really have to do more and more and more to prove that they belong. And I don't know that they're going to get that done with this Dan Campbell, led defense with guys like Aiden Hutchinson and so many unknown variables on the defensive line for Detroit. But I take nothing away from the offensive side of the ball. When you look at Jared Goff and what he's been able to do while he's been there, again, a storyline that's going to unfold most certainly. Now look, the Rams average 27, almost 28 points per game with Kyren in the lineup and only averaging 14 in the game while he was on IR. Now, he adds another element, being involved in the passing game. So he's not just an RB that receives the ball from the backfield. You can throw him in the slot on either side. You can throw him in a bunch formation. So there's a lot of variables. And, of course, I cannot talk about offense without Puka Nacua, who has just been an absolute stud in his second year. And it just seemed to have the chemistry between him and Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford. This has been an ongoing development between all of these guys. It's going to be an interesting game. I'd like to see what those games are going to be on a per pass, how these guys are able to really shed would-be tacklers in order to make this a very, not only an interesting game, but to make this a very tight game. And I look for the Rams to put that kind of game plan together against a very, very good secondary, a very good secondary for the Detroit Lions. And I can't even emphasize how much pressure that Matthew Stafford is going to have on him every single time he snaps the ball by the Detroit Lions. So Rams on the road, they're not my favorite. I'm taking Detroit at home, and I'm going to stick with that under 3.
Yeah, and I like that play too. I'm looking at the betting lines as you were speaking, Rudy, and the world is on the LA Rams. 78% of the handle right now at DraftKings is on the Rams. 61% of the tickets bet. That means that the Joes and the pros are somewhat together there. Only 22% of the handles on the Lions, and they're a home favorite. It's very rare that you get the public and the pros and Joes, as they call it, on the same side in a playoff game. The public loves to bet favorites. They love to bet the over and favorites. So I think we have something here. That might be one of the strongest plays yet on the card is Detroit -3. And the way it's being bet, it could easily get to 2.5 by kickoff.
Easy.
So now we had the last and final game. And it's hard for me to say a playoff game is occurring on Monday night, but it is. And I guess, fortunately for the Eagle players, it's not in the city of brotherly love. It's actually in Tampa Bay. And the Eagles have fallen upon very difficult times. They were 10-1, but as you and I had spoken before, it was done more and more with the smoke and mirrors. And I don't really like that term because it does have a toxic, negative, conjecture to it, if you will. But whenever the sentiment gets this negative in Philadelphia or New York, or Los Angeles, it gets my attention to be looking for a contrarian betting opportunity. This line came out at -1.5, being the Eagles favored, while the Eagles were getting clobbered by the Giants with their backups in the game. I think I said last week, Rudy, countless times, that if the Eagles really wanted to get prepared for the playoffs, recognize the simple fact that the Washington Commanders had little or no chance to upset the Cowboys in that situation, even if they were playing on Mars, let alone in Washington, D.C. So you pack it in, you give the team rest. What does that defense need? It needs rest. It doesn't need more reps. They know how to play. They went through that 6-week gauntlet of playoff-bound teams, and it seemed like the San Francisco game took the most out of them. They also had the overtime win against Buffalo. So I think that was the problem. But now you take the starters out after the lead is 24-0 to the Giants. And I have to question the confidence level of the Eagles right now. The market is telling us that the Eagles should win this game. But after losing 5 of the last 6 and not covering the spread in 6 consecutive games, it's really hard to back them. I want to, but I just can't. What do you think?
That's going to be tough. The Eagles have just lost so many. first of all, they've lost momentum. They have lost fluidity in the secondary. They have not been able to stop that pass. Haven't been able to rush the passer effectively. There's just so many things. Look, when it comes to 3-2 against the Birds in the postseason, when I say the Tampa Bay Bucs, the wins, the last two were with Rondé Barber, January 19th of 2003, and of course Tom Brady. We're giving the Philadelphia region adjective. Look, Philly's poor defense wouldn't have concerned me if we were talking about week 2, week 3, week 4. But the Buccaneers offense has shown signs of life in the second half of the season. I didn't even count them to be here, to be perfectly honest with you. But prior to coming in, they had scored only 22 points over the final 2 weeks of the season. Tampa Bay scored 29 points in 3 consecutive games. I'm concerned that the Philadelphia Eagles and the secondary are not going to be able to stop this pass on a concurrent basis, especially when they've blown it multiple times against teams that are much lesser than they. When I say much lesser, I don't mean that they are on the field to lose or they have the propensity to not want to play and just fold up, the house and call it a day. We've seen that play out time and time again. We've seen it this past weekend as well, and we're going to see a lot of that going on because you're one and done in the playoffs. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done in the regular season. The postseason is a whole different animal altogether. But look, the Buccaneers have to be rock solid on both sides of the ball. Of course, when you talk about DVOA, Tampa Bay's 14th in the NFL against the pass and 8th against the rush. So I think this fits up nicely against the Eagles offense. That's 12th in total offense DVOA when it comes to passing and 5th when it comes to the ground attack. Philly's a little banged up in the receiving core with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, both carrying some minor injuries. I don't think it's going to be minor enough to prevent them from getting out on the field. That's for certain. And to your point, John, when it comes to resting your starters, this game should have been a starter rest all the way around. We've seen San Francisco pull Brock Purdy, start whatever, for crying out loud, trying to remember his name to save my life. But they pull all their starters. So when you pull your starters, that gives you ability to see if the guys that you have as your backups are the viable backups, right? Sam Darnold was that aforementioned quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And then we've seen Carson Wentz, the aforementioned and past Philadelphia Eagle, take over for the LA Rams. Of course, this was way too much 49ers, way too often on every down. This was about dictating the offense. And to be honest with you, Sam Darnold probably looks the best that I have seen him look since entering the pros and getting drafted by the New York Jets back in 2018. And I remember interviewing him and very excited to get into the NFL. The problem was that he wasn't ready to get into the NFL and could have actually stayed one more year. But, again, hindsight being 2020, I just don't know that the Philadelphia Eagles can find a way to get past a very good defensive secondary with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just don't know they're going to be able to really maintain the ongoing offensive pressure on that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Unfortunately, I'm going against this. I'm picking the Buccaneers to win at least by maybe 2 scores.
Wow. I can't argue with you on that, Rudy. I really can't. The Eagles were once 10-1, but that seems like it was like 10 years ago. Another interesting thing too, I thought, and you can tell me whether my thinking is wrong on this. I heard this morning that the Eagles offensive coordinator essentially has the next 2 days off. And the reason is because he's interviewing for the head coaching job at the Carolina Panthers. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but if I'm a player and our team has been struggling the way it is, and all of a sudden, our OC takes off for a job interview, that would leave me a little irked. Am I wrong in thinking that? Because that just seems to be the writing on the wall now, that if the OC is leaving, there might be a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about in terms of changes after this season is over, and the team may be just completely shot emotionally. Like there's no drive left for them to even come out and play to their potential. Do you think I'm wrong in thinking that?
It's kind of interesting, and I'm feelings are always taken into consideration when it comes to, why do we want coaches not to leave to have interviews? Why don't they just stay around for another day or so? A lot of these guys, a lot of these coaches have not been considered head coaching material. And if I was going to get a call and I put myself in their situation and I received a call, I would want to go have that conversation regardless of what I'm doing right now. I would drop what I was doing. If ESPN called and said, hey, we want to interview you, I would drop what I was doing and I would fly there. But I don't have a team to prepare for. So that is a whole other element when it comes to preparation and hopefully not reparation. We look at this as, what are you doing? Why can't you just stick around? Can't you just hold the interview off until after this game so we can have more prep in, better game plan, maybe some play action, maybe a little bit of trickery on the offensive side of the ball? I think that it has to do with your current contract and where you actually sit in the pecking order. If your contract says, you know what, this is the end of your year, you sign on for a 1-year deal, then they should have the ability to go out and interview. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, other than the fact you're going to miss out on a day of what that would look like now that your team is headed into postseason play. I don't know that teams should have that right to pull players coaches into their bosom and interview them in lieu of what they already know is forthcoming. But again, being an assistant coach or a line coach or a wide receiver coach and then getting a call to be a head coach, huge jump in pay. These jobs are at premiums. This is not for the foolhardy. This isn't for the fainted. You either take it or you don't. Again, I don't know these conversations that these general managers have with these coaches, but at the end of the day, if I get a call, that's what I'm doing. I'm out. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to come back. That just means that I'm out. But I understand how you feel about it. I would probably feel the same way if Mike Tomlin was going to, as a head coach, leave and someone. There's a lot to consider, a lot to be considered, and I wouldn't want anybody to attack. So I don't know. And it just really depends on who the team is. And of course, the dogs are always barking, and my dogs are barking too.
That's quite all right.
So, at the end of the day, I don't know that I would be in the right mind to want to allow that to be the case.
I did hear another interesting statement, too, from Chad Johnson, all-time leading receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals back in the day. And he stated that the Eagles are playing possum and that they are going to show the world that they've had this planned all along. And I respectfully disagree with that. I think you don't ever intentionally lose 5 out of 6. You don't intentionally show up on the last game of the regular season with a 24-0 deficit to a team like the Giants, with all due respect. It just doesn't make sense. But, he is the all-time. He's played a lot of football, and he's seen an awful lot that you and I haven't seen, certainly in locker room situations. But it just seems like this Eagles team is I just think you're trying to catch a falling knife. As we learned, with my days on Wall Street, when the market is plummeting or a stock is plummeting, you don't be a hero and try to jump in front of it and get something really cheap that's going to end up a lot cheaper. And I do think the Eagles are like, if you bet them, you are trying to catch a falling knife. And that's my take on it. I think this game might be one that I just stay away from. And if Chad Johnson's right and the Eagles come out and show a game plan that is just markedly better, that means they're going to win the game. And then maybe next week I'll consider them as a betting opportunity. But I don't even know if I can put pizza money behind these guys. I like pepperoni too much.
Yeah, I like my mushrooms a little too much too. Look, the over is 11-6 of the 17 games Eagles have played under head coach Nick Sirianni. So what that means is that against teams that have allowed 235 plus passing yards on a per game. It doesn't look good for the Eagles, especially playing against a very hungry and very passionate. Now, don't forget the NFC South has been won by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now 3 years running. So it's not as if they're a bunch of slouchers. I look for Mike Evans to have a fantastic game, especially against the Eagles. So I look at this as being a more frequently targeted, more frequently caught ball by Mike Evans, who's big, long, lanky, has great hands, and he's a physical guy. So if Baker Mayfield can get it to him early and often, I'm going to say that this is more likely a Buccaneer blowout. And not to suggest it's 4 touchdown lead or anything astronomical like that, maybe 1 or 2 score game. But I think this Eagles team is fading out a little bit when you look at the second half of the season. Again, I'm not a betting guy, but if I had a bet, I would bet on the Buccaneers and maybe sprinkle something over to the Philadelphia Eagles just to kind of cover bases. So I can't win for losing.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a pretty good betting system here I'll share. Home teams, after going under the total by 28 or more points in their last 3 games, has a winning record on the season and in the game played in the second half of the regular season and the playoffs, 77% over the last 5 seasons ATS. And even though it's 77%, Rudy, it's 0-2 ATS this season. So when I do see that, there's nothing in sports or statistics where you flip a coin and it comes up heads 7 times in a row. It doesn't mean tails is due, but the laws of probability do change when it is a 50-50 proposition, such as a football game and a system that has won 77%. So you're not talking about 50-50 here. You're talking about a system that has done extraordinarily well, that has lost 2 in a row, and that makes it a little bit stronger. So it's just it's a shame what the Eagles are doing. It's mind blowing. It's more mind blowing than the announcements this week of the retirements of our legends.
Legends are falling off all over the place, and unfortunately, I think the Eagles need to not only create a game plan that allows for them to keep the defense honest for the Buccaneers, but to create some trickery. I believe it's going to be, there has to be some type of method for the Eagles to get back to what they look like during week 1, week 2, and week 3. If they can do that, stay consistent, and get it to your playmakers early and often between Devontae Smith, between him and Brown, and maybe a little running game. And I don't mean Jalen Hurts to run it on every single down. Not to suggest that's not a bad idea. Maybe put in some tush push when it's applicable, when you should actually put that game play into position. I just think there's just a little bit too much inconsistency on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles, and that's what made me believe that the Buccaneers can not only take this game over, but there's certainly some money on this line that could be paid if you were to put all your chips in one basket and pick the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to end this game in the show with just this little tidbit here. When you're looking at handicapping a game like this, I've heard this a lot this year. The Eagles have one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Well, in terms of yards per game rushed, they ranked 10th, allowing 103.4. At one point, it was around 80 per game. But the reason that is, Rudy, is because teams only run the ball against them 37% of the time. And the reason they don't run more is because they're so successful throwing the ball all over the field against that secondary. So that is one of the stats that you have to be careful. That is very misleading, that assuming that, the Eagles will stop the run against these guys. Well, they just might not. They can't really rush the quarterback. They can't put their secondary in any more of a difficult situation than playing a tight zone with brackets, I guess. I can't see them playing man-to-man against the receivers that they have. Godwin, you mentioned him, he could have a monster day. And there's too many blown assignments in the secondary too, that I hate to say it, but are day one at the college level. Guys are wide open that aren't even covered. It's not like the guy fell down in coverage and the guy was wide open. They're just missing it. And I don't know if you can fix that in a week or even a season, but that's my little lesson here on handicapping is, these stats, running yards and passing yards allowed has to be intertwined with the percentage that these plays are run. Otherwise, it's meaningless.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
The best rushing defense in the world, but if they're giving up 500 passing yards per game, then it means nothing.
No, it's not going to mean anything at all, especially when you can't become, again, going back to the word creative. You have to be creative on both sides of the ball in all three phases, whether it's an onside kick, whether it's a little flea flicker, a fake punt. You have to put these wheels of creativity together in order to spark your offense and get them downfield. Just move the chains. Just continually move the chains. If you're the Eagles, stop those chains from moving. How? Become better. Be better. Play better. Put the next man up that's going to play better for you. I think Nick Sirianni screwed the pooch when it came to starting all of his starters instead of only splitting that down. We talked about it on the last show to mix and match and put a hodgepodge together to go back and play those guys. Clearly, the playoffs is a whole other animal because you want to put all your starters in. But during that Week 18 debacle against the New York Giants, what could have actually prevented them from at least looking so embarrassed on the board is by putting the hodgepodge of starters in a mix with guys who haven't played that much. See what the chemistry looks like. You may be surprised as to what that looks like. What guy's going to be the splash playmaker? Who's going to come up with a big interception, the forced fumble, the tackle for loss? None of that was done. I've seen none of that. Zero. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Eagles found themselves where they did, not only on the scoreboard, but on the sidelines when tempers were flaring and people start pointing fingers at one another. And if Santa Claus was on the field, they'd probably blame him too.
That's for sure.
When it's all said and done, the Eagles really going to have to turn this thing around quick, or it's a one-and-done scenario. I just don't know that they can do that in a week's time and take on a Tampa Bay Buccaneer team led by a former number one pick for the Cleveland Browns in Baker Mayfield, now playing lights out, playing with a hurt rib and playing with some other minor injuries for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So could this be Baker's time to get into the playoffs? Well, this is the first playoff game for him. So this is going to be interesting to see what that looks like. He did great when he was in Los Angeles playing for the Rams, and for whatever reason he didn't stick to them, but he's stuck in Tampa Bay. He's their starter for the foreseeable future, and Todd Bowles is loving it right now.
Yep, no question. I just don't see how they're going to get away from the creativity that Tampa Bay has on defense with the blitz schemes. And the amount that they do blitz per game is among the highest in the league. And the offensive line is not a bunch of 20-somethings anymore. They're certainly all pro legends. I would put some of them, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, but it's taken the toll over the years, and that's what NFL football does to these veterans. But if you're an Eagles fan, you hope for the best, and that they get to play another week.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I'd like to see what these games are going to look like. I know it's going to be a great game against the Buccaneers and Eagles. The Steelers got their hands full with Buffalo Bills, and, of course, the coldest game of the year is going to be between the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. And I can tell you this much, John, you're going to find someone inside of the stands or maybe 2 or 3 people without shirts on. So good luck with them. Hopefully they have great insurance and able to not catch pneumonia and die from it.
I don't know if insurance covers stupidity. I really don't, but it's possible, I guess.
There could be a clause somewhere. I don't know.
Man alive. Anyway, before I let you go, Rudy, tell everyone where they can also hear you. You have a great position there in California with iHeart Radio and the Rude Dog Show. So I'll give you the stage and promote whatever you want.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you. You guys can find me at Rude Dog Reyes on Twitter. You can throw me a follow on Instagram at Rudy R. Reyes, on TikTok at The Rude Dog Show. And you can find me basically anywhere. Go to therudedogshow.com, check out all the great, wonderful interviews, conversations. Got some great stuff lined up in the new year, of course. Happy New Year, everyone. As well as if you like the whole news thing, you can download the iHeart Radio app, tune in to see what I have cooking on KVTA from 11 to 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. So just download the iHeart Radio app and check out the news and find out what's going on in California.
Awesome stuff, Rudy. For me, you can find me at John Ryan Sports, #1 at the on the X, and then the predictiveplaybook.com is the website. And I'm feeling really good today, so I want to offer everybody that's listening to the show a chance to get the whole entire NFL package for $59. My 10-unit plays have hit 68%. It's well documented across many, many sites. Over 4+ years of those bets across every single sport. Those alone are $50 a pop on the website. So you're getting the whole NFL package, the NFL 10-unit max bets included for just $59. And if nothing else, if I don't even win one pick, you're going to get betting systems and analytics that have been highly profitable that you can store and use for many, many seasons to come. So on behalf of Rudy Reyes, my good friend and pal, and the Predictive Playbook, remember the simple thing to bet with your heads, not over it, and may all the wins be yours.